Hi friends, welcome to my channel. If this is your first time stopping by a live stream, I'm very excited that you could make it today. As usual, I am going to need someone to make sure that I can be heard, but I am like 97% sure I can. I always check just to be 100% sure, but that's because I'm paranoid. Welcome to Conflict Chat. This is a brand new weekly series that I'm going to be doing. Also, I hope that the background noise in my apartment isn't too loud. If it's a little bit loud, I'm probably going to have to do something about that next week, but this week it do be like that. But I am over here beginning a new live stream series, and before I get really into the meat and potatoes of what it is, I wanted to talk about a few of the reasons why. Um, so I've been on YouTube for a few years now, and I have created content that talks about so many different things. In fact, if you go back to my oldest videos, you'll find me talking about an almost comical variety of things, from news to politics to history to atheism to mythology to even video games at one point when I tried to be a Let's Play channel, which lasted all of 6 minutes. It was a very fun experiment, but I have never really found the thing that I felt like super passionate about. That has changed recently. I have started doing live streams again, and I am really enjoying them. I'm really happy to be in front of a camera and to just be talking. And apparently, people enjoy it when I do that. It seems like my live streams usually get several hours worth of views in the space of a couple of days. My interview with Zal, which was one of the funnest live streams that I've done in a long time, has been watched for a total time period of over 5.5 hours. And that is super exciting to me. I'm really enthusiastic about that. I'm really happy to be back here and to be talking with y'all. And I wanted to talk about something that I'm passionate about, which is peace and conflict studies. I wanted to make it something that people could understand and could appreciate because I think my field, which is what I'm getting a master's degree in, is something that's really important. And it's something that's going to become even more important as society continues to be divided and as people start to struggle to bring things back to the way they once were, or to create a new normal which is better than the past. I'm of the camp that we should create a new normal that's better than the past, but I understand that that's even harder than bridging the divides from before. I'm so happy that people were interested in this topic because conflicts are something that are often seen as super scary. I live in the American South, so not South America, though I did live there too. But in the American South, we have an attitude towards conflicts that's extremely negative. And it's something that often frustrates me. We view conflicts as so negative that we are willing to sort of avoid having overt conflicts altogether, and we do that and we deal with the stress that that causes in various unhealthy ways. Eventually, I'll do a live stream talking about the unhealthy communication tactics that we as a society in the American South use. But Smitty is right that the American South is pretty supportive of overseas conflict, but I'm talking about conflicts in a wider sense. I'm not just talking about conflicts like the warring kind. I'm talking about interpersonal conflicts. So this can be as limited as someone and their neighbor coming to verbal blows over a dog that decides to go to the bathroom in the wrong piece of property, and not necessarily something as like massive as two people or two nations shooting at each other. So, peace and conflict studies, which is what I studied, talks about conflicts in a wide range of different capacities. It's not just about wars that are going on overseas, it's also about conflicts that are happening between neighbors and between neighborhoods. And I think that that's a really important point of reference and sort of measurement of conflicts, because it's very easy for us to fall for the idea that conflicts are these macro level events that shift national borders and that leave cities in ruins, as opposed to things that leave families in ruins and cause relationships to end, be it romantic, familial, professional, or any other sort of conflict or relationship, not conflict. That's one of the fun things that comes with being in a live stream series. I originally decided to make this a live stream series for a number of reasons, partially because I am going to be doing videos that break down the things that I talk about that are pre-recorded and that are not live streamed. But also, I really like being in front of a camera and just talking to y'all and being able to see your comments and react to them in real time. Unfortunately, that does sometimes leave me distracted, but that's one of the fun things of live streaming. Sometimes you get to go on tangents that are actually really fun and help bolster the things that you're talking about. For those of you who have never seen my whiteboard before, you guys are going to get to see a really common aspect of some of my live streams. I usually write on and then show a little whiteboard that I got for my birthday a few years ago that I originally wanted to use in videos just as a way to sort of like emphasize the points that I was going to be making. But you're going to have to ignore my egregiously awful handwriting. This is the worst part of the whiteboard for me. But on this little whiteboard, I have a little outline of the things that I would like to talk about. Normally, I have rules on it because Smitty's comment made me laugh. Normally have rules on it because I like to have little rules for people who want to be in the chat, but y'all normally behave really well anyway. I never really have to worry about there being super serious, heated arguments on my channel's live stream chats. But to be fair, part of the reason the handwriting on the whiteboard is so horrendous is that it's a whiteboard. I actually can write decently if I'm like writing things down on a piece of paper, but I would waste so much paper if I did one for every live stream that I did. But it is getting better, sort of. So yeah. So the first thing on the whiteboard was the definition of conflict. And the definition of conflict that I decided to go with, because there's several, obviously, is a serious disagreement, usually a protracted one. And I think that this is an important that's an important thing to talk about in any conversation about any sort of specific topic, especially if you're looking at things from an academic point of view. The main purpose of this conversation is to help get ideas from peace and conflict studies out into the mainstream. And I know that I hardly have the audience for that. I don't think that any of my viewers are going to be going on and then talking on to like NBC or Fox News after this. But I'm hoping that this will help my channel grow because I actually do like being on YouTube. I would like to eventually hit that beautiful 1,000 subscriber milestone. And actually, in the last week, I've gotten like almost 6 subscribers, which was a lot more than I've gotten over the last few weeks. And that's partially just because I've started live streaming again. So my videos are being like resuggested to the algorithm and new people are checking out my videos. Some of the people who are here are new friends who are like offline friends like Jessica, as well as new friends who are online friends who just sort of joined my community. And that's super exciting. I am super excited to see my audience grow. Hey, Randy, I definitely have not been streaming super recently. I only just got started streaming again, but I am going to be streaming regularly. This series is going to be every Saturday for the foreseeable future. At some time around this same time, I have friends who do premieres and who do live streams. So around this time, so I might push it back later just to like not only not take from their audiences because there's a lot of audience overlap, but also just so that that way they can be in the live streams. This is an experimental stream, and I'm going to be taking notes on how I did here overall, as well as how this performs to gauge what time I will be doing this again in the future. I'm also going to be talking about like the analytics and stuff of all of this at the end. So I am going to slightly get back on track. But a conflict is a serious disagreement, usually a protracted one, and there's lots of different attitudes that people have towards conflicts. I was talking earlier about the attitudes that people in the American South have towards interpersonal conflicts. And this is something that a lot of people really like to make fun of. One of the big ways that people make fun of this is by talking about the sort of passive-aggressive language that lots of American Southerners, usually but not always white Southerners, like sort of put into their language. Really passive-aggressive things, stuff like that. One of the big examples that comes to mind is the idea of using like darling or like bless your heart. And that's That's a really funny one, especially because I live in North Carolina, but I don't live in like a particularly southern part of North Carolina. That said, I graduated from a high school in Georgia, Georgia the state, not the country, and that was definitely a thing that I heard a lot. Also, hey friends, I'm super glad that more and more people are gradually popping into the chat. I know that there were a few other live streams and things going on at the same time. I didn't realize just how many things there were until people were just like, oh, I'm in another chat, but I'll definitely stop by, which was super cool. So I'm glad that friends are making it over here. I will almost certainly be adjusting this time next week, taking into account all the things that I'm learning are happening on Saturdays, because it's been a hot minute since I have live streamed on Saturdays. But it's those attitudes that make people think of conflict as a bad thing. A conflict doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing, and that's the whole purpose of this sort of live stream series and this episode in particular. I think of conflicts as opportunities for people to engage in serious, introspective dialogues and for people to consider their positions. And that's something that is a really helpful way to look at conflicts and gives people opportunities to grow from conflicts, as well as gives them an incentive to embrace a conflict as opposed to either running away from it or making it even worse than it already is. Let's say, for example, that you are in a team, either for work or for school, and you guys have been given either an assignment or a project, depending on what sort of environment that you're in. If there is a serious conflict, it definitely puts people in danger. It definitely puts your grades in danger, it definitely puts productivity in danger, and it puts a strain on the relationships involved. Running away from that conflict or doing things to try and dilute it without actually addressing it are often tempting to people, but those sorts of attitudes are not helpful. Those sorts of attitudes are often destructive, or they're often sort of postponing the inevitable. Just because I super love live streams when I just sort of blank in the middle of a thing. That's so fun. I feel like because I often live stream, people think that I'm like usually a lot better at it than I am, but sometimes my mind just blanks because I'm a native Spanish speaker and I'm speaking in English. By the way, I actually do plan to do this series in Spanish as well. I am a native Spanish speaker. I am fluent. I can do videos in Spanish. I definitely get more nervous about them. I did live streams on Facebook in Spanish before where they were just in Spanish, and that was super exciting. I have not done one of those in a while, but I would like to because Spanish is a fun language to speak. But what I was saying earlier is that if you I love the comments that I'm getting on that. Um, yeah, in Spanish. Um, what happens with conflicts when people get stuck in the middle of them is a series of negative things that reinforces the negative attitudes that we have towards conflicts. There are people who get angry when they get involved in a conflict. There are there are people who get distracted if they get involved in a conflict, and there are people who lose sight of the immediate objectives that they should be fulfilling. These are obviously things that if people get stuck in them and then they lose sight of the main focus of what they should be doing, would encourage them to be disdainful of conflicts and to try and avoid them. But the reality is that a conflict encourages people to present opposing ideas. And from those opposing ideas, people can often find either a middle ground or new alternatives that work better than their original ideas if they actually embrace the conflict and they sit down and they talk out their disagreements. This is something that's important in a wide range of relationships and in a wide range of contexts. Conflicts are necessary for people to grow and for people to begin to become more empathetic towards other people's points of view. It's often difficult for us to think about. Also, I am going to be taking notes on the language that I use because I tend to use a lot of like non sequiturs and just sort of speech fillers. It's something that I've noticed. I've been going back and I've been watching my live streams, and that's a super fun thing to just sort of pick up on, especially if you're usually a solo streamer like me, someone who doesn't like do interviews and stuff, at least not a whole lot of interviews. But yeah, so what happens with conflicts is often that people will get distracted, they'll lose the focus, and then after they get through the conflict one way or another, whether it's something completely destructive that blows up on them I do mean like the ums and the ahs, but I feel like for a lot of people it's more subtle than that. It's repetitive things that they say. For me, it's words like oftentimes, which is something that I say a whole ton of the time, and I don't doubt that I'm going to say it again. So just pick up on that, and if it gets annoying, sorry. This is a really common thing that happens to even the best speakers. It's incredibly difficult to work out your speech fillers and to actually get rid of them, especially if you're doing something like this completely by yourself. So I like to think that usually mine are less obvious than the ums and the ahs, but even then, sometimes I actually do make those mistakes, and sometimes my brain just sort of stops working mid sentence. I'm really good at like reacting to the comments and using that to fill time while I actually just sort of pick my brain back. You're making. I really like the comments. They're really fun to read. One of the best parts about this for me, being able to read the comments in real time, is that instead of there being silence, I'll be able to refocus my mind while I read and react to the comments, and I'll be able to get back to where I was before, usually without too much derailments. I feel like today is, for some reason, a little bit harder for me, but that's because there's background noise that I wasn't expecting that sometimes throws me off. So I'm just sort of making the best of my current situation. Also, I'm wearing a different shirt today than I usually do for live streams. I noticed my last like 4 live streams, I was in the same shirt. They were usually on different weeks, so the shirt was like clean, but I was like, I really need to change up my outfit. So yeah, what often happens with conflicts, and yes, I said it again, it's fine, is that people will get distracted, they'll get disheartened, and they will experience a range of negative emotions, including but not limited to anger and sorrow as a result of the conflicts. And that's because usually in our society, when people start to conflict with each other, things get negative really fast. This doesn't necessarily need to be the case. If we intentionally work on our responses to conflicts, if we think about the mental frameworks from which we approach a conflict, then we are capable of learning how to appreciate conflicts. I know that it can be really hard to appreciate a conflict depending on the person that you're conflicting with and depending on the thing that you're actually conflicting about. But if you think about it in a healthy state of mind, and if you're able to approach it when you are not in the situation where you are talking to the person you're conflicting with, you can often find opportunities. Because when you are in conflict, you're thinking about the thing that you are conflicting about. So the source of the disagreement is something that's on your mind. That can encourage you to think about it in a wide range of different contexts and maybe even give birth to new ideas. I've often found that a lot of things that I really like doing, came about from me having conflict with someone, and then and then people are able to start to think about things differently. I'm able to think about things differently. It's really nice to actually get into a conflict with someone every once in a while, preferably not people that like you really care about or people who get super intentionally and super excitedly passionate about something, because those sorts of people and those sorts of conflicts can often escalate out of control. But minor disagreements are really good for birthing new ideas. The real problem is that we need to think about what happens to us when we enter into a conflict, and we need to take time to reflect on that before we start getting into conflicts. And that's not something that's super fun. Not a lot of people like to think about how they are when they get mad. Not a lot of people like to think about how they communicate when they are infuriated by something. And that happens. But if you want to preserve relationships, if you want to be able to use conflicts productively and positively, it is something that you need to be able to do. So now, yeah. So I've already talked about how reframing conflicts is kind of a good thing, and about the sort of mental work that needs to go into that. You need to be introspective. You need to think about the context that you're in. You need to think about the issues that you care about. But now I wanted to take some time to talk about healthy attitudes with which to engage in conflicts. So, a really important healthy attitude, and this live stream is definitely a learning experience. I started prepping for this one only 2 hours before, which is not usually what I do. I did like a little bit of research, I pulled up some definitions and stuff, which is usually how I prep for solo live streams. But oftentimes I'm talking about like current events, and I'm not just talking about things myself. So this is definitely a learning experience for me. I am going to need to think about how I do this next time, which is going to be a lot of fun. I like to do that sort of research and introspective stuff because I am super nerdy. But in order to have a healthy attitude with which to approach a conflict, you not only need to know yourself, you also need to know the cultural context that you're in. You need to think about how it is that people are probably going to react to things they disagree with. A lot of the times, people react to things that they disagree with in places like the American South by diverting from it or by trying to create situations in which talking about those things doesn't feel appropriate at all. There's this idea in the American South, and it's a pretty common idea throughout the United States. It's not just in the American South by any means, but there's this idea that talking about politics and religion are taboo, and that these are inappropriate things for like formal dinners or for a wide variety of situations. The reason why lots of people like to posit that this is the case is that these things are often sources of heated disagreements. So they like to avert conflicts, and they like to prevent conflicts from happening in the first place by making those things taboo to talk about. And that's really frustrating. Lots of people in my audience are atheists, and lots of people in my audience live either in the general South or in the American South. I have a fair number of Spanish speakers who live in conservative places where rules like this are often the case. When I lived in Honduras, I knew how taboo it was to talk in Central America about things like politics and religion. It's definitely the case here in North Carolina, although I feel like it's less the case here in Greensboro, where I live specifically, than it would be in, say, Fayetteville or Southern Pines, which are two other places that I've lived that are far more conservative than this. So it's really important that we acknowledge that that's a common attitude that we're going to face. And this is something that is done to avert conflicts and to preserve the status quo. It is something that can often be really frustrating. I personally hate it, partially because I have lots of edgy opinions. Anyone who's been in my audience for a while and anyone who knows me well, people like Jessica or Tria who have talked to me like not quite face to face, but like over the phone and for like hours at a time, know that I have edgy opinions that I'm not afraid to share, but also I'm not like going to start those conversations with a random stranger just because that is impolite, and also because I usually don't feel like dealing with that sort of environments. I'm not usually a chaos creator, even though lots of my videos talk about like super edgy stuff. So, but yeah, I hope you have fun, Smitty. This is a really important thing to be aware of and to be conscious of. And it's something that is going to affect how a lot of people communicate. If people are thinking about your edgy opinions, and they might change their minds, but also lots of people have a severe attachment to a lot of ideas that are going to be disagreeable to people who are more willing to talk about things like politics and religion. I'm an atheist. I'm also a socialist. I am definitely someone whose opinions in the American South are pretty edgy, although among my particular audience, lots of my ideas aren't super edgy, even if we disagree on like the super specifics of things. So among my space, it's super cool for me to talk about socialism. But if I went out even to my university and I mentioned that I was an open atheist, that would definitely change how lots of people approach me and how lots of people view me. So that's something that I'm aware of when I walk around. I'm also aware of the fact that living in the American South, lots of people are going to be like, oh, you shouldn't talk about this. They're not going to try to directly deal with the opinions that I'm giving them and with the potential conflicts, but they are instead going to try and divert from that. And that is something that I find very amusing. If I'm in a space where I would like to change minds, I often just hammer away at my ideas and I ignore attempts to derail me. But in lots of cases, I've actually talked with people about why it is that they find things like politics and religion taboo to talk about. And a lot of people are aware that it's because these things, talking about them openly might change minds, and lots of people don't really want their minds to be changed. But this isn't about the art or the science of changing minds. This is about conflicts, and this is about reframing them. One of the things that we need to do is we need to be willing to consider that conflicts are innately neutral. They're not innately bad, they're not innately good. And viewing them as innately neutral is a healthy thing to do because lots of conflicts are usually or are always going to be destructive. Wars are always going to be destructive. There is not often an innate goodness to a war, despite the idea of things like the just war theory. There are definitely wars that can be justified, there are wars that are worth being fought, but the idea that war itself is innately a good or a bad thing is a difficult one for lots of people to square, rightfully so. But other conflicts, like someone coming out of the closet in some manner to their family and then them being approached by whether it's something like a political opinion, a religious opinion, or a something that's not an opinion, like someone's sexuality. These are conflicts that are worth having, even if they don't always result in good things happening. In lots of societies, the idea of the closet exists because these things are taboo to talk about. When I mentioned earlier that politics and religion were things that were taboo to talk about, I also should have included things like sexuality. And that's really funny because I'm an ace person, and lots of my conflicts with former family members have stemmed from my asexuality and not really from my atheism or the fact that I'm a socialist. So that's a very interesting space for me to be in and for me to be talking about this sort of thing in. But it's really important that we start to consider that conflicts are a source of neutrality, not necessarily a source of goodness or a source of badness, just something that exists, something that is healthy, something that is a part of being a social species. And I personally really like that. I think that's a much healthier attitude to look at conflicts from than the idea that conflicts are innately negative, because the idea that conflicts are innately negative is something that justifies the idea that conflict should be avoided. If something is innately negative, it makes sense for people to try and avoid that thing or for them to try and minimize it. But that's not a healthy attitude with which to approach conflicts, and it's not something that will actually make things better for a lot of people. In order to make things better for people, we are just going to have to acknowledge that these conflicts exist and we're going to have to work our ways through them. And that's easier if you have a healthy attitude towards conflicts than if you are scared of conflicts or if you think that conflicts are these evil things that should be avoided and should be fought against as hard as possible, creating a stifling atmosphere of silence where people are not allowed to exchange opinions or people are not allowed to disagree on things. And it's really funny that this is going to sound in some spaces like I'm going to be an edgy, absolute free speech sort of person, because it's not necessarily what's going on here. I definitely do align more with the edgy free speech people than with the other peeps, but also I'm just like, speech should not always be edgy, speech should always be honest. That's my position. I lean towards telling the truth. And a lot of times the truth isn't super friendly. So that's a fun situation to be in as a queer person, as someone who studies history in the South. Studying history in the South is a super fun thing that I should definitely do a live stream about because there's always lots of silly history stuff going on in the background. I'm a history major. Some of the peeps here are history majors. Luis and another person here both know me through like history things, which is super fun. I really like that. I don't often talk about the fact that I studied history anymore. It used to be like one of the big things I talked about on my channel, but I guess just because I am getting a master's degree in peace and conflict studies, it's not like that huge of a thing for me to talk about. But I went to the University of North Carolina, Greensboro to get a major in history, and that was what I did. I successfully completed it in 2017, and then I came back in 2018 to get a master's degree, and I am getting a master's degree in peace and conflict studies. That is, in fact, the main reason why I'm here starting this series and talking about things like conflict. I am ultimately planning to talk about things like peace processes and how it is that people actually work through conflicts. It's just that right now I wanted to start this off by getting people to think about how they view conflicts, because I think that that's a really important aspect of all of this. I think if people don't have healthy attitudes towards conflicts, I think that if people are afraid of conflicts or if they think of conflicts as innately bad, then it is probably going to be harder for them to approach conflicts objectively, which is an important part of eventually working through conflicts in a substantive and worthwhile sort of way. Because lots of conflicts seem to come to an end in really insubstantial ways, really performative ways that often results in the conflicts just being left to simmer barely underneath the surface. And that is something that usually results in the conflict growing worse over time without people fully realizing it. That's definitely a thing that I've experienced with regards to my atheism, where I thought that people had accepted the fact that I was an atheist, and then they really had not, and they were just being performative, and eventually that came back to kick both me and those people in the face. So I know that if I had had a better attitude towards conflict, if I had been more willing to be open about that and to actually talk it through, then there's a lot of conflict and a lot of pain that I would have been able to avoid, or at the very least prevent. Because preventing conflicts is an important and oftentimes a good thing if it can be prevented the right way. We shouldn't be so afraid of conflicts that we create cultures that stifle conversation and spaces where people are afraid to say what's on their mind, because that doesn't actually address conflict, that just masks it. And that's something that is a really important part of this. And if I had been more focused, in fact, I might actually do a different live stream on this where I talk about this in a more focused way, just because I'm thinking about this. And it's been a really fun chat, but also it's been really all over the place. And that's something that I definitely need to work on for the next time that I do something like this, where I can like focus on my points and then eventually get to a space where I can respond to comments. That's a difference. That's like a state of mind I'm gonna have to get into. Just a lot of fun. This is a whole learning process. I'm glad y'all are here learning with me. I'm hoping that in this conversation, I have helped people think about conflicts differently. This isn't quite done. We still have like a few 10, 15 more minutes left. I do an outline for streams. That's usually how I talk about my news streams. I definitely need to do that for this, thinking about it and learning from this experience, which is a good thing. Also, my hand is over the whiteboard. So if you're wondering like what my hand is doing, it's just over the whiteboard. I really like the organic nature of live streams. I like my ability to talk to people. The problem is that sometimes I talk to people too much and thus derail myself, which is still a lot of fun. I'll consider this conflict chat number 0. I'll probably go back in and edit the title since this is just a learning experience. I'm glad that people are enjoying the lack of focus and the organic nature of this. I think it's really fun to actually talk to people in real time. Um, I do need to get better at navigating this little balance, though. So that's a fun thing that I need to learn. I have done various live stream series in the past. My last one was called Asexuality O'Clock, and that was a live stream series that I did every Saturday back when I was living in DC. I did a good number of them, and um, I actually had like a strict outline that I followed. I'm definitely going to do that next time, next Saturday for this, just so that I can like be hyper focused and actually like get through my points before I start to meander off. Although I think the meandering is fun, it's just not really what I want for this. Um, so yeah, healthy attitudes about conflicts are critically useful for actually addressing conflicts and also for recognizing focus. I feel like depending on the definition that people use for conflicts, there's a lot of like things that are not seen as conflicts, even if they kind of objectively are from a more academic point of view. Lots of people have different definitions of conflicts, which cause them to not view things with the seriousness with which certain things demand. If you are doing homework assignments that is group work, which by the way, I hate group work, it's awful, but it's a really important part of my field, and every single class requires a group work project, which is both really great. I learned so much doing that, but also awful for me, someone who is not good at group work. That was a learning experience. But if you are doing a group work assignment and y'all disagree, that is a conflict. And if you don't recognize that and treat it with the seriousness with which it deserves, then your grade probably will feel the effects at some point. It might not feel the effects right away. You might be able to get through a few assignments with a group or with different groups and just sort of chill through the conflicts. But then it's going to come back to bite you in a major way if you don't recognize what a conflict is. So, yeah, that's a really important and apparently for a lot of us, a really relevant way to contextualize what a conflict is. Um, Depending on what you get your degree in, I promise you will have to do much more group work than you will in other places. As a history major at my university, I didn't have to do that much group work. But as a peace and conflict studies student getting a master's degree, as I mentioned before, just about every single class had at least one group work project. Multiple classes had more than one group work project, including in some cases with different groups in the same class. So just a whole lot of communication, which is really good for someone in my field, but it's not great if you have social anxiety. That was a really fun experience for me, guys. I'm so glad that I am in the final steps of getting my master's degree, and my final project does not require group work, aside from the fact that I'm doing an internship. For those of you who are curious, for those of you who know me and knew me before this, I am in my final little summer of getting my master's degree. I am completing an internship and then I am completing a paper. And assuming I do both well, which I have done to date, then I will have my master's degree in August. And that's super exciting. I'm really hoping I can do that. If not, it's fine. I'm still very close to finishing my master's degree. So if worst comes to worst, I will definitely just finish it in December. I'm not stressing about it. I'm just happy to be so close to being done. But it's because I'm almost done with my master's degree that I actually want to have conversations like this. There was a live stream series that I did about a year and a half ago, starting in like last November and then continuing until not last November, starting in November of 2018 and then continuing on into early 2019. I had a live stream series that I did every Monday that talked about conflicts and peace and conflict studies. And that was probably my single favorite live stream series that I did like every single week. That and Asexuality O'Clock were like my two funnest things to do on YouTube. I am planning to make this kind of like that. I'm going to look back at my notes. I'm going to review those videos. You can still find them. They are all also about an hour long, roughly, and they were up on my channel forever ago. So if you feel like just cruising through my YouTube channel, that's definitely a thing that you can do. I also have videos that are fully in Spanish. I've talked about atheism and I've talked about history in Spanish before. So you can definitely find lots of different neat little content in my channel. It's one of the fun things of being a YouTuber since like 2014, roughly. I've actually had a YouTube channel for far longer than that, for anyone curious. I've had a YouTube channel since 2009, and I started uploading videos since 2010, but my 2010 videos are awful, and I do my best to not share them. I mention them because people have found them before, and it's kind of fun to look at them, but they were very bad videos. And in them, I sang and I did things that like a 14-year-old would do on YouTube because I was 14 years old at the time, and this was like old YouTube. So it was definitely a very different world than today's YouTube, where people make a living off of the website and where there are people who have never done anything but be on YouTube before in their entire lives, which is bananas to me. I grew up watching YouTube, and I can't imagine what it must be like to have never had one job but be on YouTube. That would be the weirdest thing in the world to me. My first job was in Latin America because my family are military peeps and diplomatic peeps, and I was raised in places like Honduras and Colombia. So I have a very different work experience. I lived in Honduras for several years, and I also lived in Colombia for several years. And I spent about an even amount of time in Latin America versus in the United States up until I went to college. So it was a very interesting experience for me to grow up in both places and then go to college in the American South because I've only gone to one university. And I really like my university. None of my peeps are like none of the peeps who are here are younger than me except for one person, and she's also a UNCG person. So, Spartans, yeah. I do think that I am probably going to end the video pretty soon, but if you are here and you enjoyed the video, I am glad that you... I am never willingly going to share that link. People have found it. People have tagged me in Twitter on it. I'm pretty sure more than one person has it like saved. So there's definitely people who have it out there. I've actually retweeted the videos before, but it was in like November of last year. It was a long time ago. I do think that this is it for today's live stream. I'm super happy to be back doing live streams, and I think that it's going to be fun to be back in front of the camera. I'm going to be doing things like Twitch live streams in the near future, and it's going to be really fun because I'm both going to play videos and I'm also going to talk about my field. I'm going to learn from this just because this was a fun little mess. This was a neat little experiment where I got to talk about my field a little bit. I got to talk about my own personal insights. But if I want to make this a real series that helps people learn, I definitely need to focus better, which is fine. It's one of the natural consequences of doing this by yourself, that sometimes if you're someone like me, you can get easily distracted by the comments. And it's just a really fun experience. I really like these sorts of chats. I'm also going to be doing more chill chats. And chill chats are just really fun times where we do things like play Mad Libs and we just talk about like D&D and really rad stuff. Also, I'm going to be doing D&D tomorrow. So Zal, who is one of the admins here, if you're here for a while and you like putting links in streams, I probably will make you an admin, especially if you are like a regular viewer. Just so you know, because there's a good number of new peeps who are here. But there's a good number of new peeps who are here, and I have a feeling that that's going to continue to grow in the next few weeks, because when I make videos, my channel tends to grow just because of algorithm stuff. Also, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. I would be really cool to hit 500 subscribers. That would be halfway to the 1,000 subscriber mark, so that way I can make money off of YouTube, which is a place that I spend an unhealthy amount of time. So just being able to watch and make money off of YouTube would be super cool. But yeah, I am definitely going to be doing more live streams. I also fully plan to start making regular videos again, pre-recorded ones. And in those things, I'm going to be talking about history. I'm going to be talking about peace and conflict studies. I'm going to be talking about like news and stuff. So if you enjoy hearing me talk at you for a few minutes, like if you happen to be a person who enjoys my regular videos, those will be coming back. And also, if you enjoy watching me meander off and just sort of tangent at you in live streams, there will definitely be more of that too. I hope that y'all have a great night. This was a lot of fun, and I can't wait to talk to you again in the near future. Bye!